What can you start doing to help relieve your lower back pain? This is what we're going to talk about in this tutorial. It's about digging deeper into what's causing the trigger, because I've talked about in many of my videos that we have to understand what the trigger is, and then we have to reduce it or modify it in some way, which could be sitting, standing, bending, whatever it may be. It could be a specific exercise. So what we've got to understand is, first of all, what that trigger is, and then we've got to dig a little bit deeper, and that's what we're going to cover in this tutorial. If you are struggling with lower back pain, you do need some help, just click the link below and you'll go through to my online or face-to-face consultations and assessments. What we can then do is you'll go through the questionnaires, send them to me, and then we'll be able to get you booked in. So what can you start doing to help overcome your lower back pain, or help relieve it or reduce it in some way? Well, it's all down to digging deeper into the causes or the triggers of your pain. And as you can see here, what I've done is I've chosen a specific movement slash exercise. So if there is a specific movement that you do, or a specific posture, or a specific position, or a specific exercise that you do that triggers your lower back pain, this is essentially like the criteria or the variables that you need to work through to understand what, first of all, what the trigger is and why it's triggering it. So what is it about the movement or the exercise? So what we've got here is a set of bullet points. So first of all, is the movement static or is it dynamic in nature? Is it a movement? Is it sitting? Is it standing still? Whatever it may be. So we have to understand the posture and the technique of it. So are you in a good posture and are you using a good technique? That's number one. Because if you're not, that could be triggering it. If you are using a correct technique, then it's going to be something else. Or do you think you're using a correct technique, but you're actually, because of the education that you've had, is it not potentially where it could be? Is it not quite as good as it could be? That's something to understand, where you think you're using a good technique, but you're actually not. So again, first of all, there's those to understand, and you have to, in some respects, step outside the box to be able to view that, which is where I can come in, because you maybe think you're doing the right thing. I can then look at it and it might be like, oh, actually, you're missing this or you're missing that. So it could be that there's a posture or technique problem, but it might not be, which then leads on to, is it the frequency? So is it the amount that you're doing it in the week? So you're just doing it too much. The muscles are fatiguing and it's becoming a problem. Is it the duration that you're doing it? So again, if it's sitting, are you just sitting for too long in one period? So you may find that your bad back comes on after about 15 minutes of sitting as a duration. So what we then need to do is we then need to interrupt that pattern, and we need to get you moving before it triggers. So we might need to get you moving at 10 minutes. Is it the load? So the technique you're using is fine. The amount that you're doing it is fine. The duration that you're doing it for is fine. But because it's an exercise, you're just using too heavy a load, and that's what's triggering it. So what you can start to see is we're taking each variable and being very scientific in the way that we're trying to determine where the problem is starting to come from. And we're not just saying, okay, it's this exercise, stop doing it, because the exercise could be useful. It's just that the weight is too heavy, and that's what's triggering it. So what we need to be able to do is, over a period of time, is isolate each variable. So we need to isolate. So if you're doing it 4 times a week, we might need to reduce it to 3 times, but keep all the other variables the same, and then we can then determine that it's the frequency. Again, this is something that I work with people through on my online consultation assessment and the online coaching. Is it the intensity that you're doing it at? Are you just moving too fast? The exercise routine that you're doing is too intense. So it's trying to understand that as well. Again, as I mentioned, trying to isolate it off. So we're trying to isolate each variable at a time. So we might do it for 1 week period, we change this. We change the frequency. For another week, we change the duration. For another week, we change the load. For another week, we change the intensity, so on and so forth. Is it the range of movement that you're using? So again, all of this could be absolutely fine. The technique you're using is fine. You're just going too deep into it. The frequency's fine, the duration's fine, the load is fine, the intensity's fine. It's just the range of movement's too much. So again, we're isolating off that other variable. If everything hurts it, or it's painful all the time, look to what dampens or reduces the pain. So again, if, as I mentioned, it's painful all the time, because again, that is a common thing. So when you fill out the questionnaires, there are questions to answer that will try and isolate some of these variables. And what has been said to me is it hurts all the time, it's always painful, nothing changes it. So in that regard, what we need to think about is what's dampening and reducing. So let's just say, again, one of the questions is, how intense does the pain feel on a scale of 1 to 10? And let's just say you said it was 8 out of 10 when I do this specific movement. Or it's painful all the time and it's always at an 8. Okay, well, is there something that you can do that reduces it to a 6? Because if there is, that's a progress that shouldn't be sort of smirked at. What we need to be able to do is, okay, we've reduced it by 2 points on that 1 to 10 scale. What we then need to do is try and either keep it there or reduce it that much further. And again, it might be manipulating some of these variables to be able to do it. And then that then takes it from a 6 down to a 4, down to a 3, down to a 2, down to a 1, so on and so forth. So it's about understanding first of all, the specific movement or exercise that's causing it, and then looking at, okay, well, what is it about that exercise and that movement or exercise that is triggering it, and how can we then go about reducing it? So again, as a summary, some of the things that we need to be thinking about is it a static or dynamic nature, and is it the posture or technique that's causing the problem? Is it the frequency, so the amount that you're doing it per week? Is it the duration? So if you're doing it 4 times a week, but you're doing it for an hour, then is that a problem? Is it is it the load that you're using? So is it the weight that you're using, that you're lifting, that's causing a problem? Because if it's a movement, it could be that you work in a manual job and you're constantly moving every day, and that's causing the problem. So again, we need to try and modify what you're doing there. Is it the intensity? Is it the range of movement? And then finally, if it's hurting all of the time, are there things in the frequency, duration, load, intensity, range of movement, posture and technique that you can do that dampens it? Because what we're then doing is desensitizing the pain, as McGill would say, and then it's very much continuing that process to be able to reduce the pain over a period of time, because that's what we need to think about. It's not a case of, okay, you've got pain and then we do a specific movement or change to that movement and pain's gone. That can happen, and we need to sort of encourage that and do more of that. But if we're dampening it and reducing it, we're still desensitizing the pain and winding that pain down, which is then going to help us overcome low back pain for the long term. Thank you for watching the tutorial. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it's given you a little bit more of an insight into how you can go about relieving your pain, and also what can be discussed on the online and face-to-face consultations and assessments that I do. So if you've liked this content, please do hit the like button below. If you want to see more of it, then hit the subscribe button. And if you've got a comment or a question, please do leave it below in the comment section. Many thanks for watching. My name is Chris. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.